Good morning, and welcome back to our second day of online instruction during the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope you all are doing well. I hope you are staying safe and staying isolated so that we can kick this virus to the curb and resume our normal day-to-day lives sooner rather than later. In the meantime, we will be moving forward and keeping on. Today, I want us to take a step back and look at a style of writing called parallel structure. Now, in our last video, I had the entire PowerPoint made up and um, I just kind of walked through it. Today, I want to try something a little bit different. I want to try creating our PowerPoint as we go along. I want to see if this is a style that might work a little bit better. That way, as I'm explaining something, I am typing it or drawing it up, and that way we're not all just reading together on a slide, but at the same time you can always go back and see the slides written out as well and check out what works better for you, what works better for your classmates, and what is the more preferred style. But anyway, today we are talking about parallel structure. Now, some of you might not have ever heard this phrase parallel structure before, and that is perfectly okay. So first we need to go through and understand what is parallel structure. When we write, we want our sentences to be this strange phrase, parallel structure. So what does that mean? Well, it's a style of writing that ensures that your sentences match and line up with one another. I know that doesn't really help very much, and we're about to see some examples, but first I want to draw a kind of cross-curriculum example. So when we come to this slide right here, we've been saying this phrase parallel structure a lot. And we might not know what that means in English, but we have heard this phrase before, this word before, parallel. If I go up to my line tool, and there we go, and I draw this line right here, and then I come back up to it, and I draw a second line right here, how would you describe these two lines? Roughly. They might not be perfectly lined up, but how would you describe these two lines? Well, they're perpendicular lines, are they not? Because we have two lines that intersect in such a way that they form a right angle with one another, roughly. And again, I'm using a trackpad, and so my right angle marks might not be perfectly lined up, but these are perpendicular lines. However, if I take my line tool and draw this line right here, and I come back down here and draw another line right here, what are these two lines? Well, these two lines are parallel lines. They look the same, they're the same length, they're lines, so they'll go on forever, but they will never intersect. They will never break into one another and interrupt one another. Well, our writing is the same way. In any given sentence that we write, we can write to where our nouns or our verbs or our phrases are parallel. They match up 100% and they do not break with each other, because if we have two non-parallel lines, if we have, say, a line right here that would be simple to be parallel, but then we have another line that comes in right here, they're not parallel and they're not even perpendicular. They intersect, and it's a little bit of an awkward intersection. Well, sometimes our writing reflects this kind of awkward intersection. And so we want to get into the practice of writing parallel sentences that match up completely with one another. Forward, we talked about how parallel structure can match up your nouns, your verbs, or your phrases. And I want to start by matching up our nouns and seeing how nouns can be parallel even within the same one sentence. If we look at the sentence here, I enjoy basketball more than playing video games, we understand what the author is saying. The author enjoys this outdoor physical activity, basketball, more than he enjoys sitting in a room on a chair playing video games on a TV screen. However, this sentence structure is not parallel because if we break apart this sentence, the sentence has this comparison right here, this more than, and we'll get to more than in just a second, but what is being said here is I enjoy basketball more than I enjoy enjoy playing video games. If we break this sentence down word by word, phrase by phrase, we have an I and an understood I. We're good. Enjoy, understood enjoy, and then we have our noun, basketball. But here we have another verb, playing, and then we get to our noun. Do you see how this playing right here throws off that parallel structure? We don't match up completely. We don't have an I to I, enjoy, enjoy, and then noun to noun. That's what makes this sentence not parallel. But if we fix it, and we can, all we have to do is get rid of this playing right here. So we can look down here and see I enjoy basketball more than video games. Well, it's I to an understood I, enjoy to an understood enjoy, basketball to video games. See, we have the 1 to the 1, 2 to the 2, 3 to the 3. Now, again, these are understood, the I enjoy right here. When we're writing, if we're just matching up our nouns, this is almost like the stem of the sentence. And so we just need to worry about the noun right here, basketball, and the noun right here, video games. The other way that we can fix this sentence is by inserting a second playing, because a person plays both basketball and video games. So we most certainly could write, I enjoy playing basketball more than playing video games. This turns this into a parallel structure where we match up a verb and a noun, but it's very much valid. It's perfectly valid and legitimate and good to go, because once again we have the I to the understood I, because this is our stem, enjoy to an understood enjoy, again our stem, and then playing to playing basketball to video games. Both of these are absolutely correct. And again, do you see how the I enjoy is again acting as our kind of stem of the sentence? But then we get to the playing and playing, basketball to video games. These are both nouns, and these are both verbs, or you can just say noun and verb. But that's the gist of setting up parallel structure with nouns, making sure that our nouns are parallel. We can also match up our verbs with our verbs. Consider this sentence for me. Last night, here, let me make this text a little bit larger. Last night, I worked, studied, and was watching television. Now this is going to be similar to how we discuss our nouns with our nouns. Let's break this down. Last night, we can assume that this is going to be the stem of our sentence, right? This is just an introductory phrase. And then I is our subject. Again, don't have to worry about matching this up with anything. It's a subject. We have worked, studied, and was watching. Now let's consider the breakdown of these verbs. We talked about verbs way back earlier in the semester, a couple of months ago, and we talked about how we have what we call simple verbs and verb phrases, did we not? Well, worked is just a simple verb, right? I worked. We have it in the simple past tense. We just added ed to it. We're good to go. Studied is the same way. We have our root word of study, and then to make it past tense, of course, we drop the y, add an I, and then an ed, and so it becomes studied. But by all means, it is a simple past tense verb. Was watching, however, well, this is a verb phrase. Was is a linking verb, and watching is a progressive verb, is it not? Therefore, what we have here is not a simple past tense verb, but rather we have a, if anyone can remember, a past progressive verb tense. Well, that's not simple at all. And so what we need to do is we need to work to make all of these verbs either simple verbs, and it's easy. We can do either one. I would recommend making them both simple verbs, but that's just for simplicity's sake. If we want to turn was watching into a simple verb, how would we do it? Well, the word watch is a fairly regular, not even fairly, the word watch is a regular verb. And so to turn it into a simple past tense verb is to simply add ed to it. Therefore, we get last night I worked, studied, and watched television. Now, you might be thinking that it seems all fine and dandy at first, but what about the fact that we just have the verb right here, the verb right here, and now we have the verb right here, but we see what we're watching. We don't see the work that we've done or what it is that we've studied. But I want you to remember that with parallel structure, what is important is that you remember what you are making parallel. If you are focusing on your nouns, then you would want to make sure that you have a direct object after your verb. If you want to just focus on your verbs and making your verbs parallel, it's perfectly fine to make sure that so long as your verbs are in simple past tense, then you are good to go and you don't necessarily have to have a direct object. Personally, I would kind of like to see a direct object, but that's because I like to make my sentences as parallel as possible, and sometimes I can be a little over picky about that for my own personal preferences, but there's nothing inherently stopping you from just making sure that your verbs are parallel, and therefore you don't necessarily have to have a direct object for every single piece of your sentence if you don't necessarily need it. Now, we've turned these all into simple past tense, but of course we can also make them past progressive. We could say I was working, was studying, and was watching television. This is also perfectly valid. This is good to go. And again, we are following the conventions of parallel structure because all of our verbs are written in the same style. They are all past progressive.